The only light in the room came from a single kerosene lamp on the nightstand, and I remember staring at the flame where you stare at something when you cannot bring yourself to look at the thing you are actually afraid of. My wedding dress was folded over the back of the chair. Downstairs, I could still hear the last of our guests moving through the house, the low murmur of Pennsylvania Dutch, the scrape of benches being stacked against the wall, and beside me, on a bed my husband had built with his own hands, I sat completely still and I thought, I cannot do this tonight. My name is Martha. And this is Hannah the Amish Girl, the channel where I say the things my community would never allow me to say out loud. I grew up Old Order Amish in a small district in Ohio, and what I am about to tell you is something that has never left the walls of my community. Not fully, not honestly. If you want to understand what Amish life actually looks like from the inside of it, please subscribe and tap the like button right now, and tell me in the comments. Did you know that a bishop could be called to a couple's house on their wedding night? Because most people do not. I want to start by explaining something that took me years outside the community to fully understand. In the Old Order Amish world, a wedding is not primarily a celebration of two people who love each other. It is a covenant, a public declaration before God and the congregation that two souls are submitting themselves to the Ordnung, the unwritten code that governs every part of Amish life, together as one household. The bishop who performs the ceremony is not just a minister, he is the keeper of that covenant. He is the one who will be called if the covenant is broken. And in my community, the wedding night was considered part of that covenant. I had been baptized at 16. I want you to understand what that means. Baptism in the Amish church is not what it is in most Christian traditions. It is not a moment of personal faith. It is a binding oath. You are promising before the entire congregation to submit to the church and the Ordnung for the rest of your life. To leave after baptism is not simply to change religion. It is to break a sworn vow. It means shunning, meidung. Your family stops eating at the same table as you. Your mother stops answering the phone. The community you have known since birth closes like a fist around the space where you used to be. I was baptized at 16 and I was married at 19. His name was Jonas. He was 24 from a neighboring district, a good carpenter with a serious face and kind eyes. Our courtship had been short, less than a year. Sunday singings, buggy rides home, bundling visits in my family's house with my sisters whispering in the next room. He had never been cruel to me. He had never been anything but careful and quiet. When he proposed, I said yes because I cared for him and because in my world, saying yes was what you did when a good man asked. You did not wait for something that felt like the songs described. You were grateful, and you said yes. What I could not have told anyone, what I did not have the words for even inside my own mind, was that I was terrified. Not of Jonas specifically. Of what the night was supposed to mean, of what I had been told by no one and expected to know anyway. The silence in my community around the physical reality of marriage was total. My mother had said nothing. My older sister Rachel, who had been married 2 years, said nothing. The week before my wedding, my aunt had hugged me at a frolic and whispered only this, "Be a good wife? Martha." That was the whole of my preparation. By the time Jonas and I went upstairs that night, I had been awake since 4 in the morning. I had cooked for 300 people. My feet were swollen inside my plain black shoes. My neck ached from keeping my head bowed during 4 hours of ceremony on a hard wooden bench. And underneath all of that exhaustion was something else, something I had no name for. A refusal that had been building in my body all day like water behind a dam. He was gentle. I want to say that clearly, because this story is not about a cruel man. When he reached for my hand in that dim room, his hand was warm and he moved slowly. He was not trying to frighten me, but when I understood what was about to happen, something in me simply stopped. My whole body went rigid. I pulled my hand back, I moved to the far edge of the bed, and I said, quietly but clearly, "Not tonight." The room went very still. Jonas looked at me for a long time without speaking. I could see the confusion on his face, and underneath it, something else. Not anger. Something more like alarm. As if I had not simply said no to him personally, but had said no to something much larger than him. Something that included the bishop, the congregation, the ordnung, the covenant we had made that morning in front of everyone we had ever known. He said, "Martha, it is our wedding night," I said. "I know, I am not ready." He sat on the edge of the bed for a while, I do not know how long. The lamp threw long shadows across the ceiling. Downstairs, the last sounds of the guests faded. The house went quiet. Eventually Jonas got up, straightened his suspenders, and left the room. I heard his boots on the stairs. I heard the back door open and close. I did not sleep. I lay under my wedding quilt, stitched by my aunts, log cabin pattern in dark blue and green, and I stared at the ceiling and I waited for something, though I did not know what. What happened the next morning is the part that no one outside my community would ever expect. Jonas had gone to the bishop. There is a part of this story I cannot tell you here. Not on this platform, not on us rules. The algorithm has limits and I have learned exactly where they are. So I wrote the rest down instead, slowly, without the softening, without the cuts. Everything the camera is not permitted to show. The book is called The Ordnung They Never Wrote Down. 208 pages of what plain life looks like from the inside of it. The link is in the first comment of this video. That is where the part I could not say out loud lives. The bishop's name was Levi Troyer. He was 61 years old and had led our district for over 2 decades. He arrived at our house the morning after our wedding while I was standing at the kitchen stove making breakfast. I heard Jonas's voice in the front room, low and careful, and then another voice, older, certain. And then Jonas came to the kitchen doorway and said, "Martha, come sit with us." I want to describe that moment as carefully as I can because I have spent years trying to understand what it actually was. It was not a threat, exactly. Jonas was not threatening me. Bishop Troyer was not threatening me. They were both completely calm. That was almost the worst part of it, the calmness, as if what was happening was simply the natural and correct response to what I had done. As if my refusal the night before had been a problem to be managed, the way you manage a cow that will not enter the barn, and this was simply the management of it. Bishop Troyer sat at my kitchen table, the table Jonas and I had been given as a wedding gift, and he opened his Bible and he talked to me about the covenant of marriage. He talked about the wife's duty. He used the word Gelassenheit, which means yielding, submission, the surrender of self to God and community. He talked about the importance of beginning a marriage in the right spirit. He did not raise his voice. He did not call me names. He spoke with the absolute certainty of a man who had never once in his life been asked to question whether what he was saying was true. And I sat across from him at my own kitchen table, 3 months past my 19th birthday, and I nodded. And I felt something inside me go very quiet, not peaceful quiet, the quiet of something that has given up making noise because no one is listening. After the bishop left, Jonas and I did not speak about what had happened. We did not speak about it that night, or the next week, or the next year. We simply moved forward, the way Amish couples move forward, inside the structure of the life we were supposed to be building. We had 3 children. We tended the farm. We showed up at church every Sunday and sat on our separate benches, men on one side, women on the other, and I kept my face still and my hands folded, and I thought about a great many things that I did not say out loud. I want to be honest about something that is complicated to say. My marriage to Jonas was not a miserable one in every moment. There were nights sitting by the wood stove when he made me laugh. There were mornings in the kitchen when the light came through the plain window, and one of the children toddled across the floor and I felt something genuine and warm. He was a hard worker and a steady man, and he tried, in the ways he knew how to try, to be good to me. The system that had shaped him was the same system that had shaped me. He had been taught what a husband was. I had been taught what a wife was. Neither of us had been given the tools to be anything else. But I never forgot the morning the bishop sat at my kitchen table. I never forgot what it meant that my refusal on my wedding night had been treated as a community concern, not a personal one. That my body, on the first night of my marriage, had been understood as something that did not entirely belong to me. It belonged to the covenant. It belonged to the Ordnung. It belonged to the bishop's jurisdiction. I left at 26. The shunning was immediate. My mother returned my first 2 letters unopened. My sister Rachel, who had said nothing to me before my wedding, now said nothing to me in a completely different kind of silence. The formal silence of my dung, the silence that means you are dead to this community while still walking around alive somewhere else. Jonas kept the children in the district. That is a different story and a longer one, and I do not have the words for it yet that do not break me open. In therapy, in the years after, I learned things about my own wedding night that I should have been told at 16. I learned that what I had felt in that room, that full-body refusal, that rigid and absolute not tonight, was not a failure of faith or a failure of wifely duty. It was my own self, the self that the Ordnung had spent 19 years trying to make invisible, speaking in the only language it had left, the language of the body, which cannot be baptized and cannot be shunned and does not take vows and does not yield. My therapist said something I have thought about many times since. She said, "The most effective form of control is the kind that makes the controlled person believe their resistance is the problem." I sat with that for a long time. I thought about Bishop Troyer at my kitchen table, calm and certain. I thought about the word Gelassenheit, yielding, surrender of self. I thought about how the Ordnung does not need to be written down, because it is written into you long before you are old enough to read. I am not telling you this story because I believe all Amish marriages are like mine. They are not. I know women who found real partnership inside that world, real tenderness, real care. Eli and Lavina's story is one I have heard and I believe it. The tradition is not entirely darkness. There is community in it so deep it has a texture. There is a work ethic that has carried me through every hard year since I left. There is faith, fractured, rebuilt, unrecognizable in some ways, but still there. But there is no covenant that belongs on a wedding night that overrides what a 19-year-old woman says in her own bedroom. There is no bishop whose jurisdiction extends to that room. There is no ordnung that is holier than the word no, spoken quietly, in the dark, by someone who is not ready. I was not too young to cook for 300 people. I was not too young to keep a house and tend animals and sit for 4 hours on a hard bench and smile at everyone I knew. But I was too young to understand that my silence on all the nights that followed that first one was not faithfulness. It was a girl who had been taught, from the moment she could understand teaching, that her resistance was the problem, that her body was not her own, that the covenant was larger than she was. If you grew up in a world where your no was treated as a community's concern, I see you. If you were told that yielding was holiness and that your own self was the obstacle, you are not alone. Your refusal was not a failure. It was the truest thing about you. If you want to read the version of this story that YouTube will not allow, the full pages are in the Ordnung. Never wrote down. First comment of this video, and that is everything. Choose your freedoms wisely. They might just save your life.